Hey everybody, Chris Collard here with you. I am in Montana at an event called The Big Thing. It's Expedition Overland's Big Thing. And it is a super special day for me because with me is Patty Upton. And Patty is a semi-longtime friend.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But Patty is legend in the world of jeeping, in the world of off-roading, in the world of overlanding. She is an OG in the space. And Patty, I just want to say, I am so glad to run into you again.
Oh, it's been great seeing you again. I mean, it's been several years since we've actually seen each other. Right. And yes, great place to be to see each other.
Yeah, wonderful. Patty and her husband, Loren, basically drove around the world in like 5 years, 6 years, crazy numbers of miles, across the Americas, across Africa, across the Darien Gap, which is crazy. That's the jungle.
Yeah, it was the meat and potatoes of the expedition.
Yeah. I mean, people will say that, but you did so much more than just the Darien Gap.
Yeah, the Darien Gap was only 125 miles of a 56,000 mile trip.
First of all, I also want to honor Loren. So Loren passed away
2022,
a couple years ago, and but he's with us in spirit, and his hat's right here. So everybody say hi to Loren. He was an incredible man. Ex-Marine. Well, he was a Marine. Once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine.
Exactly.
And a man of incredible intestinal fortitude. But we're going to talk about the Jeep in a minute. But Patty, I want you to share with everybody just, a little bit about how it started, how you guys met, and how the whole expedition around the world came to be.
Boy, that's a lot in one question, isn't it?
No, I'll take it in little bits. It might be multi-segment here.
I met Loren in 1975. I had been living in Panama in the Canal Zone, living and working there. And my at the time, my husband, now of course my ex-husband, brought Loren home. So he introduced us. Loren had arrived in Panama in the Canal Zone. He was driving a big Ford 250, I think it was a 72. He'd specially outfitted for the Darien Gap and this trip around the world. And when something like that shows up in such a small place at that particular time, everyone goes, oh, this guy thinks he's driving to South America from here. He's nuts. And I'd seen the car go by one day, 2 days, and then a couple of days later, my husband had flagged him down and brought him home for dinner. My husband and I had contacts both through scouting. I was with Girl Scouting, he was with Boy Scouting. And we had contacts with people that had supplies, first aid equipment, some of the military. We knew people that had been on a Panama sea level canal survey through in the Atrado area of Colombia. So they had some information, some maps, some contacts, that sort of thing. So we kind of supplied him with stuff, and off he went.
And Patty, let me just back up. What year is this?
75.
1975.
Yeah, this was late 75. Dry season is normally December, January, February, give or take a few weeks on either side. And this is only because I asked a meteorologist in the Canal Zone, when does dry season begin? He said it officially begins after the last rainfall. So yeah, it's anybody's guess as to when dry season actually starts.
After the last rainfall.
2 weeks.
Brilliant.
Oh, 2 weeks after
He's
the last.
He's a true meteorologist.
Yeah, yes, and he went to college for that and got a degree. 2 weeks after the last rainfall. Okay, fine. So yeah, it's anybody's guess as to when dry season will finally come. But that's the only time you can really try to take on the Darien Gap in a vehicle. The roads are the trails are less muddy, the ground is less muddy, less slippery, the rivers are a little bit lower. And it's the temp. To me, someone said they thought dry season was warmer. I find dry season down there cooler than rainy season. And it's obviously a little bit less humid than the rainy season. It still may be up in the high 80, 90% humidity, but it's not close to 99% humidity and 99 degrees.
So, and what I found is that the dry season is just a little bit less wet.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit less. And once you get into the jungle, it doesn't matter. You're going to sweat anyway, and you're wet all day. And the only thing you can kind of hope for is that your clothes dry out overnight so that you're only a little damp when you put them on in the morning and still dripping.
So his first expedition on the Ford.
That one ended very sadly for him. He broke an entire rear axle housing, and the man that was with him, who was a few years older than Loren, he was a former Army medic, and he had a prosthetic foot, so he was camp cook and medic. So he always stayed with the vehicle. So when the breakdown happened, Loren was going between a construction site that was working on the road to Yavisa and back to camp and searching trails. So he was back and forth, and Larry stayed in camp with the vehicle, and natives that lived nearby, there was a Kuna village nearby, they would bring Larry water because he couldn't walk down to the river. Larry spoke pretty good Spanish. Anyway, Loren was out waiting for the parts to arrive at the construction camp, and one of the guardias said, the man that was with you was shot and killed. And that really surprised Loren. He'd heard rumors that a man had been shot and killed, but supposedly the rumor was it was nowhere near where the ford was. Well, it was Larry that had been shot and killed. Nobody knows what happened. It was probably an accident. The natives down there are kind of careless. I don't want to really say careless, but they don't. Careless, I guess, is the best word with their weapons.
They didn't go through the gun safety training program.
No, they did not go through any gun handling classes, and they're old. They're held together with tie wire. They're Cookie's on this expedition. Cookie had a shotgun that we'd carry in the back of the truck, and I'd have to pass it to him sometimes if we were, we'd be stopped winching, and I'm inside, and he'd come up yelling, "Escobeta, escobeta!" There were hyena pigs up further, and so I have to very carefully pick this thing up in two hands because of the tendency to fall apart. And hand it to him out the window, and he'd go running off and got pig for dinner that night. But it's just that they're old weapons, and it's their livelihood, and they just keep them going. But it was just that they didn't think about everything, and we just assumed nothing was stolen. The Guardia locked everything up when they got to the scene, and they gave an inventory to Loren, and they showed Loren the stuff that they couldn't lock up. They had locked up at the Yavisa jail. Now, granted, the inventory, when Loren first saw the inventory and the supplies, they all matched up. Later, when he got the supplies back, it didn't match up with the inventory. So there was a few things that disappeared in there. But
very sad.
It was just one of those things that it set him back. It really did, because he didn't want to feel like he had talked somebody into something. And he knew Larry, like I said, was Loren was 40 years old at the time, so Larry was 45. So he was a grown man. He'd been a few places, he'd done a few things, he'd served at the end of the Korean War. So he wasn't somebody that was going off on a whim and following some romantic's idea of fun and adventure and whatever. And so that was the only saving grace that Loren could hold on to, was this man was not some 17-year-old kid that he talked into this.
So when he got done with that,
end of trip one.
He did a couple more. So
yeah,
for all you guys watching, Loren wouldn't stop at anything. I mean, he basically just wanted to finish. He had a dream.
Right. He was a man that if he said he was going to do it, he was going to do it. If he said he was going to start at the end of the road at Prudhoe Bay, he was going to start at the end of the road at Prudhoe Bay. If he said he was going to take one American-made vehicle around the world, he was going to take one American-made vehicle around the world. Since the Ford didn't make it, he went back to the States, went back to work, came back the next year driving a brand new CJ-7. That one, he made it through the Darien Gap, 49 days, but he did about 10 miles lashed atop some dugouts and raft material going through the swamps. The rains had started to come. He was in the Atrato swamp area. He had absolutely no desire to be stuck in the Atrato swamp area for a 9-month rainy season. So he said, basically, let's just get out of here. They found a river. They started going down this river. We were talking about the weeds that choke these rivers. They're not enough to support you. They're enough to think you're going to be supported if you stand on it, but then you just go right through. But they're massive and thick. And he actually ended up using, not, of course, this Jeep, but the winch cable of that Jeep to go. He'd send the Canadian, he had a young Canadian kid with him. He'd send John out to take the winch cable through, and they'd use the winch cable to cut through these weeds to clear a path to get down these or up these rivers. And they did about that for, I don't know, I think it was like a day or so. They got about 8 or 10 miles, and they found dry land. And then they went out. A few weeks later, they lost that one over a cliff in Ecuador. It was foggy, it was misty, it was cold. That Jeep had a soft top, and the top had been taken off and folded up and put on the hood, and the windshield was folded down going through the Darien Gap. One of the windshield motors had been inadvertently turned on and burned out. And as Loren reached out to clean the windshield because the wiper wasn't working, he was watching what he was doing instead of what the road was doing, and it went over a 300-foot embankment. that put an end to that trip. He returned a year later, and this would have been early 77. He didn't return till early 79, so 2 years later. It was just after Mark Smith had gone through. He was in there 2 weeks after Mark Smith, which he thought was fantastic because he knew Mark Smith was going through, and he'd heard rumors of it. Of course, the natives were all telling him of it. He got down there, and Mark Smith went through with chainsaws, and that was something Loren didn't use, so he basically only had a winch. He did not have to cut anything. I mean, if a tree fell during the night, they had to cut it. But as far as clearing a trail, it was pretty well cleared for him. And got as far as just over the border in Colombia, still considered the Darien Gap. And he had a disagreement with a park official. Again,
this would have been the Catillos.
Right, yes. And like I said, Loren's a man of his word, and he feels that every man should be a man of his word. A handshake doesn't necessarily do it, but look a man in the eyes. What the man says is what the man means. This man told Loren that he needed permission to go through the Los Catillos Park. So Loren said, okay, fine. He had 7 men on the payroll, halted the expedition, said, search trail, I'm going to Bogota. Now that's not like, packing your bag and walking 2 feet and getting on a bus or a plane or whatever and getting to Bogota. It was an 11-day round trip for him to get out to Bogota and get back to the Jeep. Which when he walked into the office in Bogota, they said, you don't need this, but here's your permission. And he went back out there, looked for the park official at the park headquarters, and they said he wasn't there, he was somewhere else. So, and the rains were coming again. He had no desire to be anywhere near there in the rainy season. Got back out to the Jeep, got there like at, I think, 5 o'clock in the morning. He made the men pole upriver all night, got back to the Jeep, said, look guys, we're moving, let's go. And they started winching up a hill, and the park official showed up. He said, no, you can't go. Loren says, I've got my permission right here. I'll get to the top, I'll show it to you. Got to the top and showed the man the permission. He didn't even want to touch it, didn't want to look at it, wanted nothing to do with it. Made that clear to Loren. And, Loren then realized what the guy wanted was a payoff. And that's, if he'd started with that, they could have negotiated there and saved that round trip of 11 days. But no, the man said he needed permission. He went and got the permission. Anyway, park official said, no, you can't go. And Loren made the mistake, and you have to choose your words carefully. And Loren's really a very calm person. You have to push him hard to get him a little bit irritated. And he just told the man, actually in a very calm voice, it's going to take more than you and your gun to stop me. And that was a very poor choice of words. The guy came back the next day with more men and more guns. They had to take the Jeep back down to the Cocorica River, or winch it back down to the Cocorica River, and it was left right on the banks of the Cocorica River with a cable tied around a tree. Loren had hopes of being able to go back and get there, but things came up, various jobs, that sort of thing. So it was just abandoned. So that was 3 trips, 3 failures.
That's great.
This is the one.
Loren was an amazing guy. That's incredible. I mean, that is dedication.
He probably made failure is not an option long before Apollo 13.
Yeah. So this was his 4th.
Yes, this one was his 4th attempt.
So and we're not going to get into the Rockshore crossings.
Yeah, no, the Rokon.
Rokon. That's what I was looking for. The Rokon crossings.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry.
That was another whole
story.
Yes.
You met. He was going through all of this with his current expeditions, and then you were married at the time, but
no. Yeah, I was married. Yes.
Married
I was married when we met in 75. I saw him briefly in 77 when he came down, gave him some more information. I don't know. They stored the Jeep doors and their sleeping bags and a few other things with us. Mm-hmm. And all I can remember is John Blake coming in after the 77 trip. And he said, we made it through, grabbed the doors, the sleeping bags, and hit the airport and flew out. That is the last I heard of anything about Loren. I didn't even see him. He stayed in Colombia with the Jeep until 1984. And by then I was separated from my husband. So it was like, okay, now maybe my mind and my age is now a little bit higher than it should be, but my mind was more in, I think maybe I could do this at least for a little bit, go for a short period of time, because I worked, I had a job. And he needed a photographer, and I thought, well, that's something I could do. And I could arrange for someone to take care of my job. I worked for the Girl Scouts, and we really weren't all that busy for the January, February, March era. It was pretty much, they were all on their own type of thing, the troops. I wasn't doing camp, I wasn't doing festivals. Those were all in the fall that we did those things. So it was pretty easy time for me to be gone from the office, so I arranged to be gone for 30 days. and join for the 30 days. We thought he'd be through or fairly close to being through in that 30 days. Yeah.
Okay. There's something about a
Heinz,
number like 734 or
741.
741. We'll get to that number, 741. So he asked you to go.
Yeah, well, I asked him. I said I'd like to
Okay.
go as photographer, and he was fine with it. He said that would be great because he was looking for someone to go, because he's driving the vehicle, he's behind the wheel when they're winching. His nephew had flown down, Lawrence had flown down from the States, and was going to go for at least the first 30 days that we thought we were going to get through, if not longer. We weren't sure at that point. And so Lawrence was 22 years old, footloose, fancy-free, recently out of the Army, and said, yeah, I'll go. And Loren, he really wanted someone that spoke English and understood English to be out front when winching, so that they understood that that winch cable couldn't just ball up in there somehow when you're winching, that it had to keep a pretty orderly roll to not snap that cable. So he really wanted a gringo, an English-speaking person out there for that. So that was Lawrence's job. Mine was just to take the pictures. Well, that I didn't read the fine print. I did not read the fine print. That other duties as a sign kind of popped up every now and then. Grab that winch cable.
So when he showed up in 1984,
yeah,
and this was all transpiring, this was the vehicle.
This was the vehicle.
Right.
The Sandship Discovery, and she's named after one of Captain Cook's vessels of the 1700s. Loren was definitely explorer blood in his system. That's all he ever wanted to do, was explore. And he was born 100 years too late. There's so little left today, even in 84, that could be done that hadn't been done in any way. So it was kind of a, he always tried, the previous vehicle was named the Victory after,
I think it was a Liberty ship.
could be, yeah. He always named his vehicles after something that was important in history. Sandship Discovery, Sandship because he was a desert person, and Discovery because of one of Captain Cook's vessels.
Amazing story. So we're going to start walking around. Patty's going to share details about the vehicle. But you're currently working on a book, is that right?
Correct. Misty Tokarski and I are working together on a book about the Sandship Discovery and her story.
Your story.
Well, it's my story too, but
The three of you.
Yeah, the three of us. You're right. It was a threesome. Yeah, there was the vehicle, and yeah, that was the third team member. Yeah, there were three of us there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. So we're going to talk about the Sandship Discovery, but yeah, definitely. Do you have any idea when you think your book might come out?
We're hoping towards the end of this year. So hopefully by the first of next year, so that when these overland events and expos and rallies and all that start taking place, the Sandship Discovery and I will go around and do our best to get her sold. I want to introduce you to the Sandship Discovery. She's a 1966 CJ-5 Kaiser Corporation. Loren bought her in '83 with the purpose of taking her around the world, including the Darien Gap. So he did several modifications. He did most of them. He had some of them done. Not a lot. I mean, it's pretty much still a stock vehicle. There's not much he really changed to it. One of the things he did that stands out the most to people is the fact that Loren was 6'4", and his height was from his waist up. He couldn't see out the windshield of the Jeep. So he cut the roof off and he raised it, and you'll notice there's this panel at the bottom of the door, and there's a black strip hiding the part that he added back there, and it goes all the way around, and then there's a panel across the front where he extended that cab by 4 inches, which means we've taken a short, narrow vehicle and made it more top-heavy than it was to begin with. This is his family crest that he designed. Everything has a meaning to it. And I have it on a cheat sheet at home because I can't remember it all. We did make sure that people could tell that she was a Jeep, and she's a capital letter Jeep. That's one thing I really love. They're fewer and further between than they ever used to be. But yes, she's a capital letter Jeep. Loren's number is 713. That's always been a number from when I first met him in '75. I have no idea the significance of the number other than the 7 is an upside down and backwards L, and there's 13 letters in Loren's name. But he always told me there had to be mystery in life. And so there are more meanings to it, and he always alluded to biblical meanings. So if anyone's really versed in the Bible, because there's an awful lot of 713 chapters and verses, so I'm not sure it refers to any specific one there. I'd like to hear from him. He has Jackman wheels. I'm not really that versed in wheels, but they're evidently part of the culture at the time. He bought this in '83, so sometime '83, '84. I know Dixie Pick was a big company at that time, and I guess Jackman was equally as big in the wheel industry. And these are Jackman wheels. He did paint them red. It just looked better with the vehicle. We ran General tires from the United States and through the Darien Gap. We're now on Firestones, but General was a sponsor in the long run for our tires there. He has various nuts and bolts and things screwed. Some of it doesn't make any sense. They were there, and like he's got plugs for where a previous owner was a ham radio operator. So this thing had holes in it all over for antennas. This one was probably a water bag one. When we were in the United States doing Desert Southwest in '92, we traveled for 9 months in the Desert Southwest, and we had the old-fashioned canvas desert water bags. I think that's what this was. Couldn't swear to it. Don't know what this, oh, you know what this one probably did is across the hood going through Africa, we carried extra jerry cans of gas. It helped lash down the jerry cans. These are the backside of screw eyes that are inside, and that's the same thing on the passenger side. And we carried, I think it was like a 1.5 quart plastic jug of motor oil, so it was easily accessible. Loren is the type of person that could look at something, well, as you can tell with everything that hooks and screws and screw eyes and things that are attached here, and say, oh, I could do this, or I could do that, or let's make this work, or oh, here's a great place, let's pack something in here. Under the hood was no exception. First, the engine's the Dauntless V6. It's the original engine. The Dauntless V6 was offered as a option in '65, and it did so well that they decided it would be standard in '66. So therefore, she does have it was a standard motor. He made a few modifications. He put in, he's got an electric fuel pump he put in over here. He has a water fuel separator he's put in here. At one point, he had all, and you have to kind of peek around the backside, clear fuel filters so that he could see what was building up in there. And I think he had 3 filters in between everything, you know, so that everything was ultra filtered, because gasoline in third world countries was never the quality that you would get in any other country. Okay. He's got the shovel stored here. He's got a pick handle here, and a pick head is lashed in over here. At one point, the jumper cables were wound around the horn. He's got a snatch block here and 2 snatch blocks on that fender well. He's got a belt here, and I think this belt has probably been here the entire time. I would not know. I wouldn't rely on this one. He's got, at one point there were probably about 7 shackles overall, but we've got shackles in here. Fuel pump. He did put in a 4-speed transmission. It had a 3-speed, and it was popping out of 3rd gear maybe when he bought it. So he put in a 4-speed and put on headers. And other than engine-wise, that I think is all the changes he made to it. Because of the headers and the heat that they produced, he put wood here. The inside also, we've got wood floorboards and wood up against that firewall as well. And I know it's counterintuitive to use wood as your firewall, but it was a good insulator. We had some old carpeting in there at one time, because as anyone that drives an old Jeep knows, that whatever the weather is inside, the weather is the same outside, and the weather outside is the same inside. If it's cold one way, it's going to be cold inside. If it's cold or hot outside, it's even hotter inside. When the engine was worked on in 2017 by his nephew Lawrence, and they didn't do much. They tuned it, they cleaned it, they worked on the brakes, they fixed all her leaks. They didn't really do a lot, but that's what we wanted. We did not want her back to showroom perfect. And the fun thing is they left a lot of his temporary fixes that he had put on out in the jungle. There's a castor oil piece of metal in here that obviously was, because I know at one point would this be the header right here? the exhaust pipe. At one point in the Darien third dry season, that thing was rusted through and we literally breathed fire. And I'm sure that castor oil can was there for fire protection. In addition, at that same time, he had put a tin can over that exhaust pipe to help curtail some of the flames. Same thing with the castor oil here. The one that I don't understand, and it may be just a spacer, but there's a smashed bottle cap on the throttle cable. And they left all that there. Who knows? It may be doing something important, but you know, we don't want to touch things at work. The side hill adjusters, which I'll explain in a minute, are stored right here. That's strictly their storage place. I'll show you what the side hill adjusters did. This was something that Loren came up with from his time in the Darien Gap. He knew that side hills were always going to be an issue. And with us being as top heavy as we were, they could be a very bad issue. What he did is he welded a nut on the axle and on the frame. Big nut, all four corners. And then when we came to a side hill, he would jack up that low side, take that turnbuckle and screw it in on the low side, front and rear. And that would shift some of that weight back towards the middle, take the spring out of the the bounce out of the spring, and make it a little bit more secure when going around side hills. Loren purchased this Jeep in 1983, primarily because, well, it was a Jeep, and second because it had a Ramsey power takeoff winch. Someone just told me recently that, well, maybe he bought the winch and the Jeep happened to be attached. But either way, that power takeoff winch is what got us through the Darien Gap. It's on the transmission, so we had a 4-speed winch. We had no issues with this thing at all. Loren called it a cat bar. As I said, the winch was on the vehicle, but it had not the best fair lead. I mean, that thing's huge. So when you're winding up and with a pull on it, you're going to have cable going everywhere. So Loren attached this piece of angle iron in front. And if you look real closely, you'll notice that some of the holes are pretty well worn. Well, that was because the way we did this is whoever was out here winching and giving directions to inside, they would lever that cable over all the time as we spooled the cable in, so that it would always stay in a reasonably orderly fashion. Loren was a little bit more adept in when we would winch. He would let it kind of bunch up because he knew about how far he could go. But with Lawrence or one of the other gringos working the winch, he always had them do it as perfect as possible because his little butt was in the car. All right, the bumpers were his idea again. Needed something that was round like a gliding pattern, because going in the Darien Gap, you're going to be hitting stuff and bumping into stuff, and if it has a rounded surface, it's more apt to glide than snag or crumple. And these pipe bumpers, he called them high tensile strength steel. He tried to drill them to put these bolts through. He couldn't do it, so he took it to a machine shop, and they said, oh yeah, we can drill it. Well, when he went to pick it up, he looked at it, he said, you burned the holes through. He says, we could not drill that. We had to burn the holes through. So, which, I mean, if that's what you have to do, you have to do. So it is I mean, there isn't a dent in this. There's a few little scratches of paint, but there's no dents. And believe me, these hit things. But these pipes are completely hollow. And then there's this chain that goes in just a couple of links. It doesn't go all the way through. And this is same front and rear, 4 corners, chains hanging. These were used multiple times. I used it this morning to put a ratchet strap on to straighten the ratchet strap out. They're indispensable. It was used to hook onto, and that's how it was loaded aboard ship in Chile to go to South Africa. We used it on side hills when the side hill adjusters were not enough. We would take a cable and attach it to a tree. If this was your side hill and you're going to have to come this way, and that's your low side, you'd go to the high side, you'd attach a cable to a tree behind the Jeep a ways, and then to a tree in front of the Jeep, run that cable, put snatch blocks on the cable, and then he would drive up as close as possible, and we would hook the snatch blocks on the chain front and rear, so that as he drove along, that chain or that cable was keeping him from going the wrong way. He had these on the bumper, again, tie downs, whatever, you never know when you need something. And these were used a couple of times to lever the vehicle back onto the trail. In the swamp area, the passenger tire had fallen off the trail, which was about a 6-foot drop down to the river. Fortunately, it just dropped and rested on the frame there. but there was no tree anywhere nearby to winch to. And the guys were going to dig and put the spare tire in the ground. And they dug down about, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 inches, something, probably 12, 14 inches, and there was running water. So the ground was not stable. So he decided, well, that's not going to work. What are you doing? You have to think things through. He says, let's have lunch. So we all sat down and had lunch. And he says, okay, I know what we're going to do. And he took these and loosened them up and turned them so they were horizontal to the bumper. Had the men cut a pole, preferably green so that it wouldn't snap, about probably 4 inches in diameter, maybe 10 feet long. And then he used that and put that over this flat eye and under that flat eye. He had men down the bank at that tire. And as he told them what to do, these guys hung on this end of the lever going this way with the vehicle, and these guys that are down on the tire are pushing. And after, I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4 times, we were able to actually lever it and get it back up on the trail. We're using Rancho suspension, and we got those in England courtesy of Rancho suspension. And we used those for the rest of the trip until we finished. And then actually in the States, when we brought her back, that's all she drove on. And then when we were re-outfitting her for her trip to complete the final mile, Rancho suspension here in the States sent us all new shocks for her to finish the expedition on. The front axle is, from what I understand, standard. Now, what standard is, I'm not sure, because all that down there doesn't make much sense to me other than it makes us go forward. It might be a Dana 30, it might not, I just don't know. If it's stamped on there and it says, I'm a Dana 30, I'd know that, but since it's not, I don't know. It has drum brakes all the way around, and as we just discussed, if it had discs, it would stop better than it does, but it does stop now better than it ever has, but it's still sometimes questionable. The transmission's a T98, 4-speed T98 that Loren put in. And then the rear axles are free floating, and those are because we had so many rear axle problems. It was getting to the point where we were changing them almost as soon as we were changing our socks. So by going to the free floating, it was a little bit simpler to do. Okay, let's move around to the back and we'll start back there and I'll show you a few more interesting things. These are propane tanks. We use these, he used them here in the States when he was traveling to Panama and Central America because he was doing his own cooking. And then, because we had a little propane stove. Once we were in the jungle, we relied on the hired cook to do the cooking for us, and that was all done over wood fires. And then once we were out of the Darien, it was just us, we went back to the propane and cooking on the propane stove. Spare tire is mounted on the tailgate, makes the tailgate very heavy. High lift jack is mounted on the tailgate, makes the tailgate heavier. And the Wyascott 2-ton come-along is mounted inside the spare tire on the tailgate, which makes it extremely heavy. So all in all, the tailgate is a very heavy thing to lower, which we can do later if you're interested. What else is there? As I said, the rear bumper is the same as the front. Chains, I know what I can tell you what these were used for in the rear. We called it a cable drag. We got in a place, the natives called it the MA, meaning the letter M in Spanish. That's how M is pronounced. Extremely steep ravine. Mark Smith went through this area, and I believe the British went through it. They called it the Devil's Switchback because it is extremely steep and rugged. And it's a straight down practically and straight up. Not quite, but pretty close to it. We lost all oil pressure when we turned around backwards and started using the winch cable just to unspool to go down this to the MA River, down to the bottom of the MA River Valley. And within a couple of minutes, Loren realized he had no oil pressure, and with the power takeoff winch means you have no engine. So that's where the Wyascott came out, and that was used that day about 6 hours to hand winch down to the bottom of the valley. We had to hand winch up the other side. Took 2.5 days to get out the other side. However, we had to come up with another method to get down steep hills because that was not going to be the only steep hill we would come across. So we'd sit around at night and we'd throw out ideas. Lawrence is in his tent, Lauren's on his table, I'm inside because that's where I slept, and we're all kind of talking, saying, oh, maybe we can try this, or maybe we can try that, or what if we did that? And what we came up with was a cable drag. He would try to stop at the top of a hill with a tree, good-sized tree, and he'd always ask the natives, is this muy duro, hard, not a softwood, muy duro, and they'd say yes, and okay. Because that depended on how hard that wood is to how many wraps of cable he would put around that tree. He would attach a cable to this eye with a shackle, and then run that cable around this tree. If it was a really, really hard tree, he might just wrap it around the tree just once, and then that cable would go down the hill. Through the eye of the cable, we put 4 or 5 men with a log through the eye of the cable. And by using braking power, which is always iffy, and the friction of the cable rubbing on the tree and the men on the end of the cable, he could pretty much control his descent going down some pretty steep hills. That's what we ended up with instead of having to go backwards down hills. And sometimes he didn't put enough wraps and it was a little softer wood. He'd suck those men up a little faster than necessary. And at one time he put a full, I think the first time we tried it, he put a full wrap around the tree and then down. And that was so hard. I mean, it stopped him. He couldn't go. It was just that friction of that cable cutting into that tree was so tight. The men weren't even holding him. I had to get the cat bar out and use it as a pry bar again and pry that, because now we've got pressure on it. We can't get the pressure off. I'm using the pry bar to release the pressure on the cable that's around the tree so that he can inch down the hill. She has a fuel tank in the back, which I believe holds about 20 gallons, but since there's no fuel gauge, it's a guess on my part at this point. And then on the roof, we have and that's a custom-made fuel tank, by the way. That was Loren's addition. Rack on top comes off. The pipes that hold the rack up there are threaded on the back side, and those threaded bolts screw into these two, I'm not sure, I thought he always called them cat heads, but I'm not sure. He worked construction, so that's another whole thing I'm not real familiar with. And they thread into that. And then I've got 2 legs that are stored inside that are totally individually adjustable. They're held together with, I call them a hairpin clip. So if the ground's on level one side, you can adjust one leg different than the second leg. And that became, as soon as camp was made, that was table, bed, chair, whatever. We didn't have chairs, so we'd sit on the table. We'd sit on the table, eat dinner. We'd sit on the table, talk. And then Loren slept out here. This was his bed during the Darien Gap and most of Africa. I had the primo conditions, which is something that Loren did, and people do not understand the fact that you can sleep inside this vehicle. I call this the primo conditions because the jungle is alive. It is truly alive. If it isn't alive, you got problems. But there are insects everywhere: bees, ants, wasps, ticks, gnats. All of those were a bother. As far as creatures, animals, we made so much noise going through the jungle, they were nowhere near us. But between the insects and the plants, because some of the plants stung you or had needles on them that would poke you and fester and cause some damage. But those were by far much more dangerous because you can get all sorts of diseases from these things. So being on the ground was not where you wanted to be. You wanted to be off the ground or in some type of an enclosure as much as possible if you were going to have to be on the ground. It was not the best place to sit. So sitting on the table was definitely the best option. But Loren had fixed this up. Both seats fold forward. This will just drop down. It's just such a stiff bungee. It's hard to undo and redo. And then these 2 boards just pop off. They're being held in here by just pins. So these 2 boards swung around and came into an L-shaped sleeping platform. If Loren had to sleep in here, which he did on occasion, his head would be crammed in that corner and his feet in this corner. And if I had to be in here at the same time, I was usually curled up against the roll bar holding on for dear life. It was not comfortable with 2 people, but for one, I had, like I said, the rear window would be open. I had mosquito netting over the windows, over the doors. Usually could get a breeze through here. We actually had curtains on it at the time. I had primo, I tell you what, primo conditions. Also stored in here, there's a climbing rope up at the back here. That was used on several occasions, sometimes when tying dugouts together or whatever. But its main use came in the story when we had to float down the Nile. And that's another whole story, but that's the rope that tied the inner tube to our raft. We had a cassette recorder. Loren was an aficionado of classical music. Good classical music. And he knew his classical music. Put him on Jeopardy, he'd win the classical music section, hands down. Couldn't spell cat, but he could tell you who wrote what, when, and how. And at night, when we'd make camp and everything's quieted down, the men are in there sleeping, the crew is in there sleeping, not hammocks, but their mosquito netting, and everything's quiet, I would turn the key to accessory and Loren would tell me what tape to put in. And Loren would listen to the tape. He wasn't one of these people that went to sleep by the tape. He listened to the music. And after 20, 30 minutes, he'd wake me up and tell me to turn the tape off and turn the key off. But we did that for several nights, and the natives would come over and razz us about the music. You know, that's not music. This, you know, has to have cowbells and whistles to be music for them. And then, I don't know, several weeks later, a week or so later, something, it was a long day. We were tired. We didn't even put a tape in. And the next night when we made camp, Cookie came over and he said, "Musica, por favor." They actually started to miss the listening to the music. So I thought, how wonderful. We're bringing a little culture into the jungle. You had storage space behind both seats, especially since the seats folded forward. I don't remember exactly what was stored back there. Anything that we wanted to get quickly and easily was most likely what was there. There was storage space between the seat to a degree because that's where the lever was to change the gas tanks. If it was pointing back, that was the rear tank, and then right or left pointed to the two front tanks, which were custom-made tanks that Loren put in, hold probably about 11, 12 gallons each. And again, there is no fuel gauge, so hence we have a stick. That's the fuel gauge. And we would always, through the gap, we never ran fuel in the rear tank. We don't need that weight behind the axle. So we only used fuel out of the front tanks, it was kind of like a good, bad, and maybe worse situation because now you've put that weight up higher instead of behind the axle. So it was an iffy thing. But since there's no fuel gauge, he would run, when we're out on the roads, he would run the fuel out of the back tank. And as soon as he knew that the wasn't picking up fuel, I would switch it to right or left tank, and then we could keep track of what we had in our tank from that point on. And there is great storage down here between the seats, or between the Jeep and the gas tank on both sides. And that's where the hatchet's there, the cat bar was there, a roll of wrenches was kept there, channel locks. Again, tools that you would need quickly, easily, without having to dig out a main toolbox. And that was divided into 6 compartments below deck, about the height of ammo cans. And there's a place in the center that was long that took, when we were packing long tools for any length of time, like the high lift handlebar bar would go in there, the cat bar would go in there. Things that we didn't need when we were out on the road would go in there. Plus the tire tools, the tire changing tools were in there. And then the ammo cases were filled with all the other tools, nuts and bolts, tire patch kit, extra fuel filters, you name it, it was all in ammo can. Oh, and then one box was important papers, passports and that sort of stuff. And then extra oils, lubricants, brake fluid, anything that was needed for the running of the vehicle was kept there. And that's just the depth of an ammo can. Then there's more storage below that that's accessible through the tailgate, and that had just two tin drawers that took the stove, the pots, the pans, and the food. The top area was just for soft things, sleeping bags, sleeping pads, backpack with the clothes in it. We had 2 dish pans that fit between the roll bar. Wash pans did double duty. Actually, they did more than that. They contained the water if it sloshed out of the water jugs. Then they were also our bathtub. They were our dish pans. And if oil had to be changed, they were lined with a big heavy plastic bag, and they were used as the drain pans for the oil. Loren wanted to make sure that it was always visibly locked and closed. And this was our method of doing that. When we were in camp, we didn't lock it, but any other time we left the vehicle, it would be locked with a padlock. They were all the same key, and it made it very simple and easy and secure. And you could visibly, people walking by didn't have to rattle a doorknob, which didn't work, and see that it was physically locked. Everything on here was locked. The high lift, the propane tanks, the come along, which also locked the spare tire, the hood. So there was nothing that could be accidentally lifted off and disappear into the nether regions. And when you're in the nether regions to begin with, when you miss something important, it can be, you could be in dire straits. Another question people ask me is food. What did we eat? How did we prepare it? What did we use for refrigeration? That sort of thing. Simple would probably be the first answer. Going through the Darien Gap, we hired a cook. We had anywhere between 4 and 14 men working crew, cutting trail, clearing trail, and we couldn't have done it without them. And in doing that, we hired one of those men to be our cook, because now we're feeding these people, because that was part of their wage, was 3 meals a day. We hired, first season we had a different cook than we had the other 2 seasons in the Gap. Ended up with Cookie. Cookie is a phenomenal man. Love him dearly. He's still alive, little ill, but still alive, living in Pucoro in Panama. And our meals through the jungle consisted of rice and beans for lunch and beans and rice for dinner. And breakfast, we got to celebrate and have oatmeal. He would make fry bread some days. We had hot tea. Cookie knew that our water had to be boiled for so long for our hot tea. Other than that, we pilled our water. He would hunt, and he would usually get wild turkey or saino, which is the wild pig, or fish. And he did get a small deer, a venado, one day, which is almost as big as a dog, just about as big as a dog, very, very small. And the saino, the venado, and the turkey, if we didn't eat all that meat the first night, he would build a smoke rack over the fire, and he would smoke that meat all night long so that it would last for a few days, because there was zero refrigeration. Didn't have the room, didn't have what it took to keep batteries charged, didn't want to have to deal with it. It was just one of those things. It was fairly new technology back then. It was there, but they've made big strides in it now. So yeah, it was just a luxury we couldn't afford to have, and we didn't use it.
Well, Patty, that was awesome.
Thank you.
That was like a journey around the world, and like this intensive section on the Darien Gap and the Jeep and Loren. And I just want to say it is such an honor to be here with you and for you to share
It is mutual
story
for
with
sure.
us.
It is mutual for sure.
We're getting some airplane noise. Dang it.
I think he's on his way out. I just wanted to say that people need to have their dreams, and they need to set goals, and then they need to set their priorities to reach those goals. Whether it's doing the Darien Gap, going around the world, going to the state next door, going to Alaska, Canada, it doesn't matter. Start small, work big. It's up to you and your specific goal and what you're comfortable with. But it's also important to try and get out of that comfort zone, because that's what's really going to let you grow and know what you can do when you're in a bind. And it doesn't matter, those binds can happen when you're going to the state next door or to Alaska. It doesn't necessarily always happen in foreign, far out places. So it was nothing but a carpenter and a secretary that did this with our savings, pooled together, a little bit of work in between, but it was our dream to do this. I mean, it was Loren's dream to begin with. I joined in. Travel has always been in my blood. So it was a very easy dream to latch onto and to help him achieve his goal. I'm gonna cry. And that was and that was what I wanted to do. That was my dream, was to help him achieve his. And doing that, we were both very, very happy.
So I had a chance to spend a couple of days with Loren and Patty a few years back as he was starting to slip from dementia. But that was it was such an honor to sit and listen to your tales and Loren's input. And you're an inspiration to not only me, not only our viewers, but to the world. Patty gave a fantastic presentation last night, a very emotional presentation at this event, the big thing at Overland Ranch. And it was a standing ovation.
Yeah,
and I know you got
blown away. Yeah, I did.
It was well deserved. Yeah, thank you.
And I want people to know, when you're doing things like this, you're not doing them alone. You're doing them possibly with a spouse, but no, you're not alone. There are people out there that are willing and ready and able to help you. And if it wasn't for the people on our trip, and I'm talking people that had absolutely nothing, wanting to give us something, and we don't need it. We've got what we need. And these people are so treasured in our hearts. The men that worked for us, yes, we paid them. Yes, they were our employees, but they became family. They are people that mean a lot to me. The farmers we stopped at and asked if we could camp. The people that would cut their fence line so we could pull in next to the house and be secure. These are the people that really made the trip so memorable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we got that plane coming back. It's going to make some noise. We should wrap up. So, guys, thanks for joining us. I hope you've stayed with us through this journey with Patty and Loren and the sand ship discovery around the world. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good timing.
Awesome. And here comes the plane. That's the behind-the-scenes cut.
Yeah.